Welcome back to the Make It Take It podcast on this Valentine's Day, February 14th, back in Studio 8A. I'm Adam Oppenheim alongside Jason Maya, our producer, Victor Kustin, John Yaley back in the studio. Guys, how are we feeling?
Happy to be here. We got a good show today, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. A lot to talk about.
Yeah, I'm also excited.
Let's get going then with cleaning the glass. So let's first talk about the New York Knicks and the Houston Rockets, where the Rockets won a game off a controversial call where Jalen Brunson was called for a three-point foul against Aaron Holiday that won the Rockets the game. The referee, after, admitted they got the call wrong. Now, the Knicks are filing a protest for that so that the game will go to overtime. And the most recent protest that was actually successful was in 2007 when Shaq, who was on the Heat, was ruled to have 6 fouls, so we supposed to foul out, which they ruled he did. Instead, he was supposed to have 5. The problem is he was traded. So when they replayed the game, Shaq was not there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that shows that the NBA, they usually get this stuff right. And there's a lot of, wishy-washy stuff with end of the game calls. Should you call it? Should you not? Do you let them play, or do you call it how it's seen? And yes, it was a borderline foul call. He jumped towards him. He probably did graze him and foul him, but it's a tough call to make in that situation. And to decide a game like that, I'd prefer if the refs kind of did not do that.
Yeah, I think that I definitely don't think it should have been called a foul, even if by the rule book it's considered a foul. At that point in the game, you cannot make that call. You cannot have the game be decided that way. That being said, like you said, Adam, it's incredibly rare they replay these
Right.
these kind of things. So, I get why the Knicks are upset, but I don't think they should replay it at all. It's a shame because it was a great game, and also Brunson had the game-tying shot 8 seconds before.
Right.
Goes from kind of hero sending it to overtime to controversial fouler. So don't love how it ended, but don't think they should replay it.
Gotcha, guys. So let's talk about some games from the past couple days. What games did you guys like?
One thing I'm really interested on is the Bucks. What is this team's identity? Because they just played the Nuggets and they beat them easily, 112-95. But then they go on to the Heat, also at home, and lose by 25. The Bucks team has not been very consistent, and come playoff time, I think that could hurt them. They just went through a stretch where they played the Suns, the Timberwolves, the Nuggets, and the Heat, and they went 1-3 in that stretch where they beat the Bucks at home, and that's about it. So I want to know what this team's identity is. Can they beat good teams? Can they go deep in series against teams? We know they can, but they haven't really shown that yet in the regular season.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that easily their best win of the season, I think Monday night against the Nuggets, they blow out the Nuggets, one of the best offenses. They hold to 95 points, and we know the Bucks defense has been the question mark. And then I know it's a back-to-back, but the next night, kind of the reverse of that result, they get blown out by the Heat at home, who's been kind of their nemesis, rival in the East, we could say. So I agree. You want to see, any team with Giannis, you think has a chance to win the East or win the title, but you want to see them in the second, chunk of the season post All-Star break, kind of string together a bunch of strong wins against good teams and make you feel more confident in them going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think if you're a Bucks fan, you're extremely worried about Damian Lillard because Giannis cannot do it all alone. Chris Middleton has just not been able to stay healthy. He's injured again. But Damian Lillard hasn't played a ton of pressure games in Portland, at least in a couple years or so. He had some of those crazy playoff games, but not when the spotlight is on him. The Bucks play so many nationally televised games, and his splits have just not been good this year. 42.5% from the field on really a lot of open shots and 34.4% from three. He's the key to them winning games because on the defensive end, as Patrick Beverley would say, he's a cone. And unfortunately, now Patrick Beverley is on that team, but looks like they're friends now.
Yeah, we'll see. We all know the flaws with the team, but they definitely have the championship ceiling, so I'm not going to give up. as long as Giannis is healthy.
I mean, and that's the reason Dame came in, was to take over that role, to close out games. And Giannis has even come out and said that. But if he's not going to, really close out those games for them and hit those big shots like he did in Portland, then they might have to find someone else to do it. I hate to say it because I'm a huge fan of Dame time. And when it is Dame time, it's electric.
Yeah, so I'll bring up the game that I was most excited about past couple days. It's Victor Wembanyama's 10-block triple-double,
Yeah.
which is very rare, especially from a rookie. The crazy thing, so he had 27, 14, 10 blocks, also 5 assists. He did this in 28 minutes, which is unbelievable. I know the team is really bad, but Wembanyama, the thing that's most impressive for me is that this is the worst he's going to be. This is like the most not acclimated to the league he's going to be. So I'm excited to see what this guy becomes, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years down the road, because he already is one of the most impactful players, especially defensively.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm really curious what's gonna lead this Spurs team to winning, because he can't be the problem. He's playing elite defense and he's doing this thing on offense. So what are the Spurs gonna do to help build that team around him so they can become a winning organization again?
I mean, it's got to be through the draft. I mean, you would think he's got to be paired up with someone else. I mean, Devin Vassell was paid big time during the summer, but outside of him, they don't got a ton of playmakers. I mean, Jeremy Sohan was playing point guard for them. Not sure what that's about.
Definitely need a
considering
point guard.
Greg Popovich knows that, the key to his team was having, Tony Parker run it. It wasn't like Tim Duncan's dribbling the ball at the 3-point line. So
even though that's kind of Wemby's game, he definitely does need a point guard, a guy that could kind of just lob it up to him and take advantage of his height and athleticism.
And I have a question about Victor Wembanyama. You know how he's 7'2", 7'3"?
I think 7'4".
Yeah.
7'4". Goodness gracious. Yeah. And you see other tall, I won't say guards, but he isn't a guard himself. And seeing KD being so tall and lengthy, but seeing Giannis so tall but bulky, would you want to see Victor go into the KD route of his career, or do you want to see him go into the Giannis route?
I'd probably say there's probably a good middle ground, but if I had to pick one, I'd go more KD, more fluid, nimble, agile. Like if you put on that much weight, it might put more stress on his body. We know tall guys, you'd have injury concerns. I think the thing that's impressive is for someone that big, they're a little stiff, a little kind of rickety down low, but he kind of moves like a guard or a forward, which is a little like KD, and he's 7'4". So I think you want to keep that agility, that nimbleness that he has.
Yeah, I think when Giannis got into the league, he was obviously very small and then gained a lot of that strength. He wasn't a great shooter, so he really only had one option to stay in the league, and that was gaining all that strength. And for Wembanyama, I mean, he's just so skilled as he is. If he was to create his own path, I think it would be more like Durant.
I agree with you, Adam. I think that he's more of just like a natural talent than when Giannis was when he came in the league. He could dribble, he could shoot, he could do this. But I don't think that takes away from his game as a center. I think that he could still, improve at finding his spot in the post, getting to his spots, turnaround jumpers over guys, which he still does do. So I think he could honestly play both ways, kind of like a Kevin Durant with the ball up top, but you could also run him in pick and roll and have him, dash the basket and catch lobs and things like that.
All right, so let's go to a couple other storylines in the NBA. Bradley Beal is injured again with a hamstring injury. Last night, he was ruled out against the Kings a few minutes, I think 5 minutes into that game. Beal's dealt with a number of injuries. What do you guys think of the Suns/Beal?
I think, this is a pretty basic take, but obviously depth and injuries is the issue with the team. I think the interesting thing is I know Beal has missed a lot of time, but Booker and Durant have been relatively healthy. And, guys like Grayson Allen have even produced more than we thought they would. But they're still only the 6th seed. And I know they're only a half game back from the 5 seed, but they're not even close to that top 4, that top tier of the West. So I even if they were healthy, I don't see them. I could see them as a dangerous team you don't want to face, but not as a team that could win 3 rounds and make the finals.
I agree. I think that Beal's dealt with injuries all year, and the big three haven't been on the court that much together. And I think it's just going to take some time for them to gel. And with Beal's injury, it's obviously going to have to be postponed.
And last storyline we're going to talk about, Woj just published an article this morning about the Warriors trying to trade for LeBron. Your guys' quick thoughts on that, and I mean, what that package would even be.
Yeah, this was one of the teams that was linked to LeBron for potential trade. You could have, maybe done like a Kuminga was probably the main piece, like the young guy, but it's a fun story. I don't know how close it came to materializing. Probably not that close. I'm glad it didn't happen because that's like kind of seemed like Jordan with the Pistons, so it just would not have felt right.
Yeah, for me, it's a fun rumor. It's good for the Warriors for trying, give them credit, but I doubt it's going to happen.
All right, so let's now switch over to the All-Star preview that is happening this weekend in Indianapolis. A bunch of different events going on, 3-point contest, dunk contest, All-Star game. And later on, we're going to talk about midseason awards. But let's first start with the All-Star weekend preview. In the 3-point contest, we have our defending champion, Damian Lillard, in it, alongside Malik Beasley, Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Halliburton, Lauri Markkanen, Donovan Mitchell, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Trae Young. Who you guys got winning?
I'd love to pick Halliburton, kind of the, not hometown, but he plays in Indy. So that'd be a fun story. I'm a big Halliburton guy. I'd probably lean not Towns, not Trae, or even Brunson, because the percentages are low. I'd probably go with one of the Bucks guys. Beasley's a boring pick, but I think has the highest percentage of all of them. And then Lillard, obviously, we know does well in this. So I'd go with, if I had to pick, probably Lillard again.
I mean, I agree with you. Halliburton obviously is the fun pick because he's playing in front of his home crowd, and he's just going to feel comfortable in that gym. But if I were to not pick Halliburton, I'm going to go with Brunson. He's been showing up in the moments for the Knicks all year, late in games, so I don't see why he won't show up under the brightest lights.
I'm going to go with Lauri Markkanen. 3 out of the past 4 years, he's shot just around 40% from 3. He doesn't shoot a lot of those fancy threes, but I mean, the 3-point contest is catch and shoot, and he is a great catch and shoot player. And obviously, Dame Lillard's the defending champ, so that should be interesting.
Another thing I want to say is good to see the bigs in it too. Markkanen, Towns. Good to see these guys getting out there and competing with the guards.
I mean, Towns always wants to compete. He calls himself the greatest shooting big man of all time, which there isn't a whole lot of competition as of now. So
he has a fair case. I mean, he takes step back threes. He doesn't just spot up and shoot. He's a pretty athletic, agile shooter.
And then last thing we'll talk about for the 3-point contest, Sabrina Ionescu of the WNBA New York Liberty is going to be facing Steph Curry. So that should be really fun. I think this is the first time that they've ever mixed in any form.
Yeah, I definitely, for me, I think this would be more fun and more interesting to watch than the normal contest, to be honest. Obviously, I'm going to be boring, but I think Steph would probably win this. But I am curious. I think they're doing a 3-point, NBA 3-point distance. But this is fun. And if it works, and it gets a good rating, I think they should keep, incorporating fun stuff like this for All-Star Weekend.
I'm going to be fun. I'm going to take Sabrina.
Okay.
I'm going to be fun because, she's talking her crap. I think she's going to come in here and Steph, Steph is obviously a competitive guy, but he might be a little bit nonchalant about this, knowing that she's shooting from a deeper distance. But did you see her running the 3-point contest? She made every single shot from not just the regular 3-point line, but from the deep ones too. She has the range to shoot from NBA threes. And you know what? Sabrina will show up and beat Steph. I'll say that.
Yeah, Sabrina Ionescu, 44.8% from 3 in the 2023 season.
Sheesh.
I mean, and she's a great free throw shooter as well. So great shooter all around. I'll take Sabrina.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we got 2 against 1.
I'm in the minority.
I'm gonna do this as an even split, but I'm gonna take Steph Curry because the past 3 games I saw this on Instagram. I think it was today. This man had 97 points, and they were just with 2 free throws. Just
Oh,
two free throws.
He's a talented scorer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm going to take Steph on this one, but it's definitely going to be an exciting event to watch.
So let's talk about an event that was exciting years ago and now is extremely boring, but hopefully the dunk contest
It all went down 2016.
can bring
Yeah.
it back to the Zach LaVine, Aaron Gordon days. Everyone who's an NBA fan knows what I'm talking about. But we have the dunk contest with the first All-Star since Victor Oladipo and Jaylen Brown. And Mac McClung's in it, G Leaguer, defending champ. Jaime Jaquez, the rookie. Jacob Toppin, known as Obi Toppin's brother. That's about all I got on him. He's also in the G League.
Yeah, real quick, I want to shout out the 2020 dunk contest.
Okay, that's
I feel
fair.
like that was the last really good one. Derek Jones Jr., the Eric
Dwayne
Gordon-
Wade.
Yeah, the 9 rating controversy. But yeah, the dunk contest, I'll be honest, I'm never that excited for it. It's kind of whatever. I do love that Jaylen Brown's in it, that there's a real star, a real name. But I think it'll probably be Mac McClung again. I think just the athletic ability compared to the other guys. He's almost like one of those YouTubers that's like a professional dunker. and whenever you see those videos, you're like, this guy would win the dunk contest every year. That's kind of Mac McClung. So as good as the other guys are, I'm going with him.
Yeah, I mean, Mac is definitely the big favorite, and odds wise, and just from what we've seen, I remember watching him in Ball's Life videos. Like everyone, I
Yeah.
feel like also everyone is
Yes.
just more impressed when the guy's like small and he's just
Oh,
a
yeah.
white guy who's just doing all this. But my pick, I'm gonna
white
go
guy
with Jamie
factor.
Jaquez. I think that he has some sneaky hops.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple videos of him jumping over some people, and I think he's going to surprise a few people, and he's going to come out with some tricks up his sleeve.
I gotta agree with that one. I don't know. I saw him post on Instagram. Man, I'm really on Instagram a lot, but I saw him post that he got something special for the dunk contest, and I don't know. I like the man's hair, so I kind of want to see him do some crazy dunks in the contest.
Yeah, he definitely has a facial hair vibe boost. I
Yeah.
think people want to see a guy like that win it. It's a little more fun.
I think he could win over the crowd, but also Jacob Toppin could as well, even though because of his brother and all. But
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, the creativity is so difficult when so many things have been tried. For me, it's got to be Mac McClung. With all due respect to his basketball game and, his scoring ability, I mean, he knew he was going to be in this dunk contest again. I mean, he's probably been preparing for this for 8 months.
Oh,
I know he's
100%.
probably a good G League player. He was decent at college at Georgetown and Texas Tech, but there's no way he could actually play in an NBA court. So what he is practicing has been dunks, and he's been practicing for months, so he better win. That's my opinion.
I agree. I think it's funny but fair that he probably has been focusing on this more than some other aspects of his game.
Like, there's no way Jaylen Brown has been thinking of dunks for like a
No.
few months.
No.
There's not a chance.
no, and also but Jaylen Brown, he's like extremely athletic, and he could bring something out that we've never seen before. I wouldn't be surprised.
A left hand dribble.
That's the thing is when it comes to switching from his left to his
Yeah.
right, I don't know if he'll be able to do that.
That
but-
would win the contest, just Statue of Liberty left hand.
Oh,
at 50.
unreal. He's done it.
Yeah.
Going back to Mac McClung's stats or what he did with the NBA. With NBA, he didn't really, shine that well. But in the G League, he is averaging 24 points a game, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists a game.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good player. Once again, with
unreal dunker.
yeah, with all due respect to him, but he's so small. But Victor, like you mentioned, he's built for the dunk contest. Everyone wants a small guy who has hops like that. I mean, he went between the legs in high school and Ball His Life, and everyone was just freaking out over that video. I don't know how many views it has now, but whew,
Yeah.
that was crazy. All right, so let's go on to something that has changed over the past year, and that's the All-Star game, going back to East versus West instead of the captains, also known as LeBron versus Giannis every year. So,
Pretty much.
Who you guys
Will
got?
Durant.
Yeah, they're in. Who you guys got win the game, and who's your MVP?
I'm going to be kind of predictable. I'll take the West. They win usually. Looking at just the roster, I think the starters, like the top of the East, aside from maybe Lillard, is pretty comparable. Not to hate on Lillard, but we all don't think he should be starting.
Oh, 100%.
And then, but the benches, I think, totally favor the West. I mean, this is players on the West bench, not even starting. Devin Booker, Steph Curry, Anthony Davis, Anthony Edwards, Kawhi Leonard. Those are all on the bench. And the East has a lot more young guys on it. So I think the West would probably win this one.
I mean, I think it's extremely hard to predict the game. I guess if I'm going to take a side, I'll go with the West. But I think it's more fun to predict the MVP. And I think Luka doesn't have an All-Star Game MVP yet. And he feels like that type of guy that, puts on a show all the time. And so I think this is Luka's year to really, how Jason Tatum kind of last year really pushed the narrative, like, all right, I want to be MVP. I think Luka's going to come out and be drilling every step back three he takes.
I appreciate you putting respect on his name. I'll pass back to you.
All right, I'm going to go with the East. And honestly, the West has a lot more talent. But for me, I look at the players who are going to play really hard for the East, and I see a ton of them like Tyrese Maxey, Trae Young, Jalen Brunson, Paolo. It's his first All-Star game. And for the West, a lot of them have been there before. Anthony Davis, like, how much is he really going to impact the game? Paul George doesn't care that much. Kawhi probably doesn't care that much.
LeBron
doesn't
care. It in.
Jokic doesn't care that much.
Kawhi got his MVP.
Shea's not a big, long-range three-point shooter, which is pretty much what the All-Star game is. Neither is Durant. So for me, I think the East is just younger. I don't have any facts to actually prove it, but it just feels like they are compared to the veterans in the West. And for me, MVP, Tyrese Halliburton.
That's a great pick. Hometown pick. I thought about him. He would have been my pick for the East for sure.
Yeah,
although he's going to need to stop passing so much.
Yeah, that's true. I actually totally agree with Victor. If I picked the East, I would have picked Halliburton. But I think if he could get 20 plus, and then if he had a crazy amount of assists, like 18, 20, then I think
I could see him having a 30 and 15 game or something like that.
There's so many cheap assists. You just throw it ahead. A guy dunks.
Yeah.
There's no defense.
Definitely. And he's starting, so he's got a great opportunity.
Yeah, it's usually always a starter. But obviously Embiid not playing as well in the East.
I do agree, Victor, that if the West does win, Luka and then also Shea were the ones I was looking at because Adam, you make a good point. The vets who have been there, done that, they kind of look at it as a relaxing weekend. They don't really care as much. But the guys that aren't starters or don't make it as much, they're more inclined to kind of go all out, try to get their first All-Star MVP, that kind of thing. Luka, I could just picture him hitting 10 threes, a bunch of step backs. Yeah. And then Shea, just because, he's kind of taking the league by storm, but I feel like he isn't at that superstar level recognition with the public. This could be a good stage for him to make a statement.
Totally agree with that. So let's switch over from the All-Star break into some mid-season awards. We thought this would be a really interesting segment to talk about our MVPs right now, our Defensive Player of the Years, Rookie of the Year. And so let's start with the big one. MVP, obviously Embiid was leading the race. Victor, let's throw it over to you first. Who do you have as your MVP right now?
My MVP right now is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And I am a huge Shai fan for many reasons. One, because I think he fits the modern NBA perfectly. He's 6'6", point guard, shoots threes, he plays defense, he passes the ball, and he's just elite on every single end of the floor. And I think he's really leading this young Thunder team who doesn't, have a leader. You see a lot of young teams come together, but they can't really put it into wins. They can maybe have a lot of talent. But the Thunder are one of the top teams in the West. He's the lead on both ends. He's scoring 30 plus, and he's only taking 3 threes a game. If you look at the other guys scoring 30 plus, they're taking 7, 8 threes a game. So not only is he a gifted defender, a gifted facilitator, he's a gifted scorer. And I think that he's the main reason why this Thunder team is at the top of the West.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I was really torn between Jokic and Shai. Those are kind of my top two, and the team's records are virtually the same. So for me, it came down to, first of all, I think it does matter that Shai hasn't won and Jokic has won too. I think that matters to
voter
voters.
Fatigue.
It's a thing. If it was reversed, you'd probably be going with Jokic. A lot of people would, at least. But also, I just think Shai, I agree. Obviously Jokic leads the Nuggets, but I think he does have a little bit more help Nobody on the Thunder I'd put at the Jamal Murray level who's been healthy. The rest of the supporting cast is good. So I would go with Shea just because of the stats are great. The team record's great, and he's carrying that big load. Really quick, though, I'm looking at Basketball Reference, and I know you guys probably know like the funny nicknames. Jokic, one of them is Big Honey and Cookie Monster.
I've heard Big Honey, actually.
Really?
Cookie Monster, I've never heard of. No, those Basketball Reference nicknames are just wild. It's like, someone just said this on Twitter, like, user Adam123.
Yeah, exactly.
So with my pick of the MVP, this might be a little biased, but I'm gonna pick Luka Doncic. I know you guys didn't even mention his name. I respect this because they're winning. They're not winning. So they're in the 8th seed. But on their past 5-game stretch, they've beaten the Sixers and they've beaten the Thunder. They destroyed the Thunder by more than 30 points, with Shai also being there. Just want to make that case to you guys really quick. But yet again, they're now just starting to get their groove back because also Kyrie is back. So he's starting to pull his weight as well. And I feel like if they just keep this momentum going, then they're going to go higher in the ranks. And I feel like Luka's going to win this.
I mean, I think that's the only thing holding him back is Luka, is the team not being a top seed. Because I feel like the last time we saw a guy win an MVP without him being a top seed was all the way back when Russ won it, when he had that crazy triple-double season. But other than that, like, Luka's stats are there, his game's there. It's just the team needs to be doing better.
Yeah, I mean, they're on a 5-game winning streak, which is tied for the longest in the NBA. I'm going to go with Nikola Jokic. I know it's a boring pick, but for me, I'm not really factoring in voter fatigue. This is who I think should win. He's just had, once again, a giant impact for the Nuggets. It's not to say Shea hasn't done that, because he really has. But the entire offense of the Nuggets is circled around Nikola Jokic. And Jamal Murray is just not the same player without him. You can tell when Nikola Jokic is off the court. They just don't have a lot going for them. The Nuggets do not have a ton of depth on their bench. For the Thunder, you can make the case that Jalen Williams has had a great year for them. Chet Holmgren has been able to protect the rim. And really, you look at all the impactful players on the Nuggets, and Jokic is like the driving reason why they're good. Like, wow, people talk about Aaron Gordon being a really good player. Would you talk about that without Nikola Jokic? Not really.
That's true. That is a very good point. And I think Jokic is the obvious pick. But like I said, I just think Shea is the true leader of this team, and the Thunder haven't been good in a while, obviously. So how do you become a team that just has talent to a team that leads into wins? And we're going to get into that later with Coach of the Year as well. But I think Shea is a huge, huge reason because that being that leader for these young guys.
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt. And it's really hard to argue against Shea in that sense. I think they're easily 1 and 2, and they've separated themselves. Obviously, Luka, if the Mavs win like a couple more games, I mean, they're the 4 seed, and if you're top 4 in the West, I mean, you have a pretty good argument.
Yeah, with Luka, I just can't give the MVP to a guy that's in the play-in, like a 7 seed. His stats are unreal: 34, 8, and 9. That's like a career game for a lot of people. He's averaging that. But yeah, I'm a big winning guy, so I'd go with Shea or Jokic. One more quick Basketball Reference nickname: Swaggy L for Luka Doncic. I've never heard that one.
Swaggy P is the only one I've ever heard of for Nick Young. Swaggy L.
That's an interesting one.
That's wild. That's absolutely wild.
I kind of like it. It's funny.
So now let's move on to the Defensive Player of the Year. Who wants to go first?
I think this one's pretty obvious. He's won it multiple times before. My pick is Rudy Gobert. Again, it's the boring one, but he really transformed this Wolves team. You know, they had Cat, they had Edwards, but they were kind of missing that piece that helped them win, like we talk about with the Thunder. So they're one of the top teams in the West, and for the same reason, they have the best defensive rating in the basketball. So I think Rudy Gobert is the obvious pick here.
I understand that. He is the heavy favorite. I'm going to zag a little bit. And I was looking at one of the 2 rookies, Chet or Wembanyama, for Defensive Player of the Year. Obviously, the stats are there for both. I would pick Wembanyama. I know that the
rookie.
The flaw would be the team's record and especially their defense, I think, is bottom 5 to 10. But I put that on the supporting cast. I think if you watch him play, not only is he, first of all, averaging 3.2 blocks a game, which is leading the NBA, and in less minutes than, a few less minutes than Gobert or Chet. The thing that's really impressive is when you watch them play, guys on the opposing team's offense will drive into the paint. They'll kind of change their behaviors. They won't take certain shots. They kind of feel his presence. It's not just on the stat sheet. It's like noticeable when you watch a game, which does happen for Gobert, to be fair. But I think the fact that Wembanyama is already doing that, plus he's leading the league in blocks, I'd go with him.
I'm going to go with Rudy Gobert as well. I was going to say a pretty similar thing to you, John, about Gobert and that game against the Clippers. Not only did he have 4 blocks, I mean, he just deterred so many shots for the Clippers in the first half. And I know a lot of people like to hate on him for his antics with, COVID, or he can't shoot free throws. He has no outside game. But strictly talking Defensive Player of the Year, there's a reason the Timberwolves have been number 1 in defense pretty much the entire year. And that's because he just blocks teams away from the paint. And he's able to hold his own and help defense at the rim. And he's able to play a little bit of perimeter defense as well, but it's mostly that inside defense that propels the Timberwolves. And he's playing with Karl-Anthony Towns, who is not known as a great defender and has really made him look sort of decent playing next to him.
That is, I think, a good point. They first of all, they have the number 1 defense, and he's clearly the kind of stalwart there. But also the fact that Towns, as good as he is on offense, he's kind of almost that bad on defense for a big man.
Honestly,
yeah.
And yet they're still number 1, and they're still locking down the paint. And it's obviously they have Jaden McDaniels, guys on the perimeter, but in terms of interior defense, it's basically all on Gobert.
And I want to say, I like what you mentioned about Wemby, obviously averaging the 3+ blocks, and but it's just the team defense not being well. I think it's in his future winning Defensive Player of the Year. But it's that's a prestigious award, and he's got, another 15 years to win it, and I think he will.
Yeah, what happens if he gets it now? Does he just win it for like 15 straight years?
Yeah, exactly.
10 straight Defensive Player of the Years.
Comparing to baseball, like Mike Trout, I mean, he has a great season. So
Yeah.
just given
If he's healthy for 140
how about
games.
Shohei Ohtani? That's even a better example. You just give it to him every year.
You might
pitches and
have
hits.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
you might have to.
Might be the same thing for Wemby. So now let's talk about Rookie of the Year. Who you guys got?
Well, I kind of gave away my pick a little bit with the last one. Wemby or Chet, it came down to those two yet again. The team record in this one, I really had a hard time not saying Chet because, the Thunder's record is so much better. But I go with Wemby still because, first of all, I don't think it's his fault that the team's record is that bad. Like, we all know the supporting cast is limited. They didn't really have a point guard. Just flawed roster all around. I think I know this is, kind of a dumb method to use and not fair to Chet, but if you did a hypothetical of switching the two, how would the teams look? I think the Thunder's ceiling would be even higher, and they'd be even better right now.
Oh, yeah.
And they'd have a better defense probably than the Timberwolves. And the Spurs would be as good or potentially worse. So I don't want to blame the supporting cast. With MVP, All NBA, I factor in team record a lot more. But Rookie of the Year, I think the stats and the impact that Wemby's putting out should matter, and that's my pick.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when it comes to Rookie of the Year, the team success matters the least because that team probably had a top pick in the season before. Speaking of Wemby. And Wemby's numbers are too good for him not to win this. And yes, Chet's on the winning team, making a great impact on a winning team. But Wemby's unlike anything we've ever seen before. And I think that this is his award to lose.
So I just want to mention this. I also agree with you guys. State Victor should win it. But does Chet count as a rookie? I know it's a second year, so technically he's a sophomore. He
He's
didn't
technically
play at
eligible.
all.
He is.
So he is eligible.
Yeah, Ben
There's been
Simmons counts as a
precedent.
rookie.
Yeah, there's been precedent. Simmons, Blake Griffin, Larry Bird, It was the year after he was drafted. So even if I feel kind of icky about the red shirt rookie of the year, especially the Embiid year when he almost won it, and it was like his third season, basically. But there's been precedent, so I don't have an issue with him winning.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Wembanyama, though, over Chet. I just think Chet is in just a much better place to succeed. I mean, look at the open shots he's able to get off of Shea, J-Dub, other players on their team, and just being able to hit threes are the Thunder at a pretty good percentage. The Spurs are not a good three-point shooting team. They have bad spacing. They don't have a point guard. He's just not surrounded by a lot of talent. They did nothing at the trade deadline, or nothing to help the future really at all. They didn't, trade anyone away. And I think I wouldn't say carrying this team, but he makes them at least watchable for sure. More than watchable, because like, who else are you looking at that team and saying, boy, I really want to watch the Spurs. Like, come on.
Little Vassell.
Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah. Vassell's a good player. Yeah. He's a good player. I'll give him top 60 in the league. Top 50. Top 50.
He's fun. He takes a lot of shots.
He does take a lot of shots away from
Rotation
Wemby.
level.
That's true.
All right, let's move on to the most improved player. This is always a controversial one. John, what do you got?
I'm going to preview this segment for the audience. This one is probably going to be the boring one because I think we all have the same pick. The favorite right now, which shocked me, is Tyrese Maxey, who is having a great season, and he's definitely improved. He should be in the discussion because he went from kind of quality starter, fringe, maybe all-star to legitimate all-star, potentially all-NBA guy, especially with Embiid out. But to me, it's Kobe White without question. For me, the value of the award should be kind of the disparity between where you were last year and where you are this year. Not did you get to an even higher level as Maxey than what Kobe White is now? He was averaging single figures last year, 9 points a game. He's now almost 20. His 3-point percentage is the highest that he's ever had at 39%, very strong. Rebounds and assists are totally up. And he's been the guy on the team since LaVine had his whole trade injury stuff going on. And the team, 26 and 28, they're in the play-in. And for roster, I do not think is that good. So he would totally be my pick.
I completely agree with you. And I think Maxey kind of follows the similar path to other most improved players have, kind of like Paul George, where they just kind of took that leap to a true all-star from a borderline all-star. But I think maybe in some of those years you didn't have a guy like Kobe White who really elevated his game that much. For all the reasons you mentioned, doubled his scoring average to 20. He's shooting almost 40% from three, and he's taking over 7 a game. This is not a guy that's just shooting 3 or 4 threes a game. He's the main scoring output for this team alongside DeRozan without LaVine on the floor. And I think Maxey, like you said, he just gained a bigger role after Harden left. It was kind of like, all right, this is your team now. You're the point guard. You show us how to do it. And his stats have improved a little bit, and he's done a great job in taking on that role. But I think Kobe White is the most improved player in the NBA.
I'm also going to go with Kobe White. Like you mentioned, John, it was going to be boring.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go back comparing Tyrese Maxey being the favorite to John Morant winning it. I think it was in 2021-22 season where he upped his scoring by 8 points a game. But the thing for John Morant, Tyrese Maxey, is we both saw flashes of their athleticism and how good they are. And for John Morant, I mean, he was the number 2 overall pick, most improved. Everyone thought he was going to be, an all-NBA player. If you're picked in the top 3, you're probably looked at as potentially actually an all-star player. So for me, Maxey has already shown signs of how good he is. And for Kobe White, I mean, he was nearly traded from the Bulls a year ago and now is really replacing Zach LaVine on that team. And you can honestly say to NBA teams, he's more valuable than DeMar DeRozan is. Considering his age.
I think he is, considering his age for sure. And considering his game. DeRozan's a guy that needs the ball. Kobe White's a guy that could kind of just sit there and, catch and shoot, take his catch and shoot threes and kind of be an extra burst of offense for you more when DeRozan has to be the focal point.
Yeah, I think we should throw the name of Şengün out. We should mention that. He was probably second for me behind Kobe White. He upped his average by, 6-7 points per game. Assists are up, and the team is like kind of fallen off a bit, but still a decent record considering how young they are and overall limited in a tough West. So I do want to mention Şengün.
Yeah, I like mentioning him.
Yeah, I like Şengün, and I do agree he should be mentioned. But again, he just didn't make the same jump Kobe White did. His percentages are still very similar. His points are up like by 6 points, but I think Kobe White has just improved in every asset of the game.
All right, last award, Coach of the Year.
Yeah, so Mark Daigneault is the heavy favorite for the, I don't know if they're the 1 seed still, 2 seed OKC Thunder, which makes sense. They're young. They haven't made the playoffs with this core, and they're doing great. But I would go with Chris Finch for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Right now, they're only a game up, so team record isn't that big of a deal, but they do have the 1 seed right now, the number 1 defense. And I know the team is talented, but I'm really impressed with how well they're playing and how well they've sustained this run, and it wasn't just a hot start to the season, especially with how young and at times immature the team is. Like, Jaden McDaniels had the incident last year. He punched the wall. Like, who knows how steady he is. Obviously, the Towns 60-point or 62-point game was kind of questionable. So for how young and potentially immature, volatile the team is, where their entire kind of veteran core is just Mike Conley, the fact that they're 38-16, the 1 seed, I'd go with Chris Finch.
I think Finch is a great option. Also, Daigneault, like you mentioned, but I'm just going to rival a little bit here. I'm going to say JB Biggerstaff. I think he's done a great job with this Cavs team as they've dealt with many injuries throughout the year. Right now, currently, they're the hottest team in basketball. They've risen up to the 2nd seed in the East, and I think the East is a lot more competitive than it used to be, and then it gives off. And I think Biggerstaff deserves a lot of credit for dealing with the injuries, like I said, and keeping this team not just afloat, but a top team in the East.
I'm going to go with Mark Daigneault, the favor, sort of the obvious pick for Coach of the Year, just how young the Thunder team is. And, I mean, like you guys have mentioned, Shea's their leader, and he's super young. I mean, they do not have, any veteran presence on their team.
Except for Gordon Hayward now.
Oh, yeah, Gordon Hayward. Yeah, he'll be there sitting on the bench injured 60% of the games, but he'll be there. Maybe not supporting the team, as we saw with that one clip with the Hornets at the end of his tenure. But I'm going to go with Daigneault. I think he's done a terrific job with this team, keeping them on track, and we'll see how they perform in the playoffs. So now let's go on to our last segment, At the Buzzer. We're going to talk about a riser and a faller. So name one team who you think will improve after the All-Star break and one team who you think will be worse. So let's start with what team you think will improve.
Yeah, so my riser, I was torn on this. I'm thinking out of the West, I'd probably go with the Dallas Mavericks. They just made a trade, got Daniel Gafford. The team's a little bigger, a little better defensively. There's still issues there. I have my questions, but could they, I don't think they'll enter the top 4, but could they pass Phoenix and New Orleans and be the 5 seed, win a series? I absolutely, with the way Luke has been playing, and then maybe Jason, he might be in the MVP race. So I'd go with the Mavericks.
Yeah, I like the Mavericks too. I like the addition of PJ Washington. I think they could have done something a little bit more on the defensive end. And I kind of feel the same way about Luka's teams that I feel about LeBron's teams. Like, if you're in it, you have a chance, like with Luka. But the team I want to talk about is the Pacers. They've now fallen to the 7th seed in the East. And I think we know how much talent they have, Halliburton being the player he is, just getting Siakam on the roster. And with some of the other teams in the East being a little inconsistent, like we talked about, Tyrese and Siakam, once they get some time to mesh, this team could move up to a top 5 seed in the East.
I'm going to go with the Magic to rise. They're the 8th seed right now. If they gain one more game, they'd be at the 6th seed. They have the easiest remaining strength of schedule. The Magic were, near the top of the East and the top 3 during the first month and a half because they had a pretty easy schedule. Then they hit a hard patch and they fell all the way down into the play-in, and I think they could rise back up. So I'm going to go with the Orlando Magic. Now, our last one, what team do you think will fall?
Yeah, my faller, this one I was torn on. I'm going to go with, I was picking between one of the top 4 West teams where, kind of the top tier. They've been that way for a while. which ones seem the most volatile. I flirted with picking the Clippers, who I think are great, but obviously injuries at any point could kind of implode the team. But even though I just made the case for Chris Finch, I would pick the Timberwolves just because of the youth, the immaturity, the kind of lack of depth at times. I think if obviously the Nuggets I believe in, Clippers if healthy, and Thunder, despite how young they are, I just think they're a better, deeper team. So I'd say the Timberwolves. I don't think they'll massively fall, but they could be the 4 or 5 seed, and then not have as much home court going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's a fair pick. And I think the obvious one is kind of the Sixers right now with Embiid dealing with his injury. They could take a big hit. But the one I'm going to mention is the Pelicans. I think that there's a lot of teams below this team. It's not so much what they're doing. It's more the teams below them. Like, they're the 6th seed right now. Then you got the Mavericks, Kings, Lakers, Warriors. We all know what those teams do. They're veteran teams, except for the Kings, but they were in it last year.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of Zion has been extremely healthy this year, which is a rarity. And I think this whole team kind of has. And I think something's kind of just due to go bad with this team, and they're a younger team that might not have as much of experience as the teams below them. So I could see down the stretch, maybe they're the team to kind of fall out of the race and let the Warriors and the Lakers get back in it.
I'm going to go back to the East with my faller, and that's going to be the Milwaukee Bucks. 7.5 games behind the 1 seed, a game and a half up on New York, 2 games up on the Sixers. I think the Bucks have a chance to fall into that 5-6 range, and possibly even the play-in. They have the 3rd hardest remaining strength of schedule. They really had a ton of cupcakes, you could say, in the first half of the season. And I think it's going to be really tough if they can't get on track with Doc Rivers. They're 4-6 in their last 10. And they got to right the ship because they're a better team than a 5 or 6 seed or a 7, but they cannot be in the play-in. That's what I will say. So that is going to wrap it up here on the Make It Take It podcast on Valentine's Day, February 14th. For my co-hosts, Victor Kustin, John Yaley, and Jason Maya, our producer, I'm Adam Oppenheim. We'll see you next week on the Make It Take It podcast.